After taking a look at the quarterbacks and the wide receivers in this draft class, we now turn our attention to the tight ends. This is an interesting group. There's not a ton of superstars, but there's one guy at the top that is potentially a generational type talent at the tight end spot. Let's go ahead and dive into our top 10 tight ends in the 2024 NFL Draft. Still certainly subject to change, but let's dive into number 10, where we have Brevin Stefon, the tight end out of Minnesota. He's 6'7", 270 pounds, so absolutely has the frame that you look for, the build, the strength, all of that stuff that you look for in a really good tight end prospect. That's kind of where the elite traits end. I don't think he's particularly athletic at 6'7", 270 pounds. Obviously, he's going to move differently than some of these 230-pound tight ends, but I don't think he's very light on his feet, and he doesn't have great athleticism. When it comes to kind of the passing game, he's really not super polished. He has just over 1,000 yards in his career at Minnesota. He's played 6 years in college and really doesn't have a lot of receiving production. Just had 239 yards and 2 touchdowns this year. And, really that's the main thing that is a big drawback with Stefon. He's really not a vertical threat at all. He doesn't challenge downfield. He doesn't rip up the seam. Really not a threat at all when it comes to that. And, that's a big knock on a tight end. I want them to be able to go down the field, really threaten the defenses vertically, and be able to make a play. I do think that he does have some contested catch ability. He can go up and absolutely get the ball due to his height and his frame, but really he's not creating a lot of separation, not getting a lot of opportunities downfield as well. So really going to have to rely on his blocking, which luckily he is very, very good at. He can move both guys that are way smaller than him, but also defensive ends and defensive tackles off the ball. He's very good coming down on down blocks. He can move as well, come around and seal the edge. I definitely think he has a lot of value as a blocker, and that's going to be mainly why he gets drafted. I just think that there's a real lack of upside in the receiving game. Really probably not going to be more than 100 yards a year, most likely in the NFL, but he can certainly stick on a roster as a tight end 2 or 3. In that blocking role, potentially be, kind of that run blocking specialist for a team. At number 9, we have another run blocking specialist, A.J. Barner, the senior out of Michigan. He's 6'6", 251 pounds. He was a transfer from Indiana. Really has taken a nice step in his time at Michigan. Has a really good build, kind of that ideal tight end mold like we talked about. And I do think he has decent athleticism for his size especially. It's not necessarily going to be the most dynamic athlete out there by any means, but I definitely think that Barner can potentially provide a little bit of juice in that department. Really, he's not much of a vertical threat either. You don't see him ripping downfield, attacking the seam, threatening that safety. Really, he's more just going to be somebody that can catch the ball if you run him on a drag, a quick stop, some kind of just check down to him. He can certainly catch the ball, move the chains if you need him to, but really where he's going to be effective, again, is in the blocking game. I do think he is even better blocker than Stefon, which is why he's rated a little bit higher. I think that he has really good ability to climb to the second level because I think he is a little bit more athletic. That allows him to get to those reach blocks a little bit more effectively. He can come around, seal the edge and a backside. And I think that's going to be very important in like a Kyle Shanahan scheme where they run a lot of outside zone. They bring the tight end across the formation. One of those outside zone Shanahan schemes is really going to like this guy as their tight end to that blocking type tight end that can come across, seal the edge, seal the backside, and allow for those cutbacks. So Barner definitely has value. Once again, really not a big receiving threat by any means. Just had 249 yards and a touchdown, and really wasn't even tight end 1 in the receiving department on his own team. So definitely think that is going to be kind of the role he sits in the NFL as well. A nice tight end 2 that has some really good blocking ability and then can take some checkdowns for first downs. Because of that, I have a 67.5 grade, which ends up being a 4th to a 5th round grade. Definitely think you could take him in day 3 and be happy with what you get. Then we move to Jaheim Hulker, the tight end out of Colorado State. Kind of a completely different player at 6'4", 235 pounds. Obviously way lighter than the last 2 guys that we have talked about. He's a junior as well coming out of Colorado State, though he has played for a very long time. Went to BYU. wasn't playing for a couple of years, transfers to Colorado State, and has a great season. By far the most productive receiver we've had on this list so far. 64 receptions, 767 yards, and 6 touchdowns in 2023. He doesn't have the best build or necessarily the best athleticism. I think he is a fine athlete, but he's not going to really run away from NFL linebackers or NFL safeties by any means, I don't think. He has solid route running, and I do think if you get him the ball, he can make a play, but really his best ability is just going to be his reliable hands, his contested catch ability, and just kind of his all-around game. He's kind of that jack of trades, master of none type of tight end, which I do think hurts him a little bit. He doesn't have that kind of trump card that he can really go to and really win at in the NFL, but I do think he has kind of really solid traits all around. He's not going to blow you away with anything, but he has the production, had a couple of really big catches this year. He had a Hail Mary touchdown that won him the game against Boise State, and a couple of other fun plays as well. So I think Hulker really kind of came on this year, excited to see if he can turn that into success in the NFL. But right now have a 4th to a 5th round grade once again. I think he's probably more of a day 3 type of prospect you take a swing on. He is a bit older, so maybe doesn't have the true upside, but I think could be a solid tight end too, kind of as that receiving threat. At number 7, up next, we have Bryson Nesbit, the receiver/tight end out of North Carolina. He's a junior. He's 6'5", 235 pounds, so certainly lighter. And obviously that means that he does not have the best build for that tight end spot. He's probably not going to be that inline blocker, somebody that lines up on the line of scrimmage and is really effective. In fact, I do think that his blocking is really not good. North Carolina pretty much stopped using him as a real inline blocker in 2023. He did a lot more of it in previous years, and they kind of moved away from it just because he wasn't particularly effective in that role, especially when he was asked to block. But what they've done more is use him as that big slot and kind of wide receiver type almost, and that point, he is really able to be effective. He has great athleticism for the position. He has really solid route running, good yak ability, really reliable hands, can win in contested catch situations as well. He, unlike some of these other guys, does have the ability to stretch the seam vertically. He can threaten a defense, attack the middle of the field in a cover 2 system where the safeties are worried about those outside wide receivers. You need some kind of big-bodied receiver that can go up and make plays in the middle of the field. Nesbit has shown that he can absolutely do that. He's done it for Drake May for the past couple of seasons, and he has looked pretty good as well. Had 41 catches, 585 yards, and 5 touchdowns this year. Like I said, I think NFL teams are going to have to know that he's really not going to be a traditional tight end. Whether he's listed as a tight end or a wide receiver on your roster, you have to know he is a big slot type of player. He's not going to be somebody that is going to be effective in line. And, he wasn't effective in college. He's certainly not going to be effective in the NFL going against the Nick Bosas of the world. So I definitely think you have to know your role and you have to be able to scheme around it if you're drafting Nesbit. But I definitely think he has a great combination that could be utilized in the NFL as a really good receiving threat. Going to have a 4th round grade on him. I think early day 3 certainly worth the swing on some of those athletic traits and the upside of what Nesbit provides in the receiving game. At number 6, a player I was pleasantly surprised with, Benjamin Urasek, the senior out of Stanford. He's 6'4", 242 pounds. Certainly not small for a tight end, but not the biggest guy either. He's not necessarily the most athletic guy either. He has decent movement skills, but he's certainly not like a burner. He's not running up the seam and screaming down and attacking those safeties super effectively. I think he does have some ability to be a vertical threat, but it's more because of his nuanced route running and his really good understanding of where to attack defenses and how to get into open space for his quarterback. I think his route running is really, really good. He has great hands, has shown he can be a reliable ball winner in the air as well on those contested catches. He can attack at all 3 levels of the field, and that's something that I really like as well. He's not necessarily the most dynamic after the catch, usually does go down on first contact, or, he's just not that big of a guy, so he's not running guys over like some of these other tight ends on this list. But, it's really not necessarily about the build or the athleticism with Urasek. He's also a fine blocker. He's not the best at it. He's usually kind of in a pretty good position. He doesn't have the overall strength and tenacity to really be able to, bury guys on the line of scrimmage or take on defensive ends reliably as well. But he certainly can be effective moving across the formation and blocking someone, but really where he is valuable is in the middle of the field, kind of being that technician, that route runner, and somebody that is particularly effective. He did miss a lot of time this season, only played in 6 games, just had 16 receptions for 239 yards and a touchdown. But I think that his 2022 tape, along with some of the stuff that he showed early in this year, do show that he could be a potentially really nice find for a team in the NFL draft. I do think he is likely to go on day 3, but I have around 3 to 4 grade on him, a 74.50. I just like a lot of the traits that he showed. I think he's polished, maybe not the highest upside player due to the lack of physical traits, but I just think he will be a quality player in the NFL for a while. At number 5, we have Cade Stover out of Ohio State. Really, really like Cade Stover. This is kind of getting to the guys that I do think could potentially have tight end 1 upside. With Stover, he's a senior. He's 6'4", 251 pounds, so he's certainly well built. Not necessarily the longest guy, but certainly has that strength and a lot of the just well-built muscle to him as well. He does lack some athleticism. I don't think he's going to run particularly fast in the 40-yard dash. I don't think he shows a lot of that on tape, which does prevent him from getting a lot of separation consistently. His route running is not really super polished. It's not necessarily bad. It's just that lack of athleticism, along with the kind of mediocre route running, does prevent him from getting big separation sometimes. But really, most of the other stuff of his game are really exciting to watch. He has some of the best hands in this class. I think potentially the best hands. Really, he catches almost everything thrown his way. He's very good at contested catch situations as well. Even if he's covered, even if he's not creating that separation like we talked about before, you still can throw it to him, and he's probably reliably going to come down with those contested catch opportunities as well. He's a very good blocker. I think it's an extremely underrated part of his game. You can see him climbing to the second level and blocking linebackers, coming across the formation and crushing defensive ends. I really like Stover's blocking ability, and I think that's a huge part of his game. He also has some great ability after the catch as well. Once you get the ball in his hands, he is a tough guy to bring down. He's just so well built. He's so thick and dynamic, and it really prevents defenders from getting a strong grasp on him and being able to take him down. He's not the most explosive or the most athletic guy, but really he plays the position the right way. He gives you that receiving upside as well as the blocking upside. I think there's a bit of a limited upside to him just because of those lack of traits, but really he does everything at a pretty good level for teams, and I definitely think you could take him in round 2 or 3 and certainly be successful with him. Likely going to be a tight end 2, but maybe could be a tight end 1 at the next level if he is able to overcome some of those real deficiencies when it comes to some of his athletic traits. Moving to our top 4 now, we have Ben Sinnott out of Kansas State. He is a junior, 6'4", 245 pounds. I like his build. He is pretty thick. He's well built. Not necessarily the longest guy, but definitely think he has some of that strength that you need to be an inline blocker at the tight end position. Not necessarily the most athletic. I don't think he's slow. I don't think he's, unathletic, but I certainly don't think that he's up there with some of the best athletes of this group. But really, when it comes to most of the other things, I think he's certainly proficient or even really good at. He is a solid route runner. He definitely has some of that technique, can manipulate with his eyes, with his head. He snaps around relatively quickly and uses pretty good footworks and able to get those releases as well. He's pretty good after the catch, certainly doesn't go down easily, certainly looking to make a play, make a guy miss, and get downfield. He does have reliable hands, and I think he's a pretty good blocker as well. The reason that he wears 34 is because he is listed as a fullback in certain occasions, so that means that, he certainly does have some blocking responsibilities and is pretty good at them, especially coming across the formation. I do think he can be an inline blocker relatively effectively as well. He has good hands, can win in contested catch situations, and he does have the ability to threaten the vertical seam and be a weapon in that regard as well. I don't think he's necessarily super dangerous at any of those things, but he does almost everything at a pretty high level. He had 49 catches for 676 yards and 6 touchdowns this year. Certainly was pretty productive. I do have a round 2 to 3 grade on him just because I do think there are a lot of different things that he can do pretty effectively. So I like a lot of the things with Sinnott and some of the things that he can provide to a team. I think he's most likely going to start as a tight end 2 and can potentially work up to that tight end 1 role as long as he develops and translates some of those skills pretty nicely. But I definitely think he could be a productive member of an offense, and certainly in round 2 or 3, I think you could be getting a very solid player there. At number 3, we have Jaheim Bell out of Florida State. Redshirt junior, 6'3", 239 pounds. So certainly a bit shorter and smaller than you typically would have in mind there, but he makes up for it with elite level athleticism. I definitely think that he runs kind of like a wide receiver, like a running back, and that shows because, they line him up all over the formation, especially when he was at South Carolina before he transferred to Florida State. They would move him everywhere. He would certainly get running carries at running back. He'd go out wide as a wide receiver. He'd play tight ends. They'd just move him all over the field because of that athleticism. They wanted to use him in creative ways and make sure that he was either being a good decoy for the defense or they were getting the ball in his hands so they could use that athleticism. He has pretty good route running as well. I certainly think that he can create separation and get open. He's not necessarily the most polished when it comes to catching the ball, has a little bit more concentration drops than you would like, and especially in contested catch situations, I don't think he does it super effectively as well or super consistently right now, but that yak ability is a huge part of his game. You get the ball in his hands and let him go to work, and typically he does very good things for you. I think if he can go to an offense that is also going to be creative and uses him in a variety of different ways and uses those athletic traits that he has, he can certainly be an incredibly productive tight end at the next level. He had 39 catches, 503 yards, and 2 touchdowns. There was a lot of mouths to feed on that Florida State offense, and he still was fairly productive. So he's not going to be somebody that is super consistent down the field, really ripping up the seam and making contested catches, but I certainly think there is plenty of value in what he provides as that run after catch. He's not the most effective blocker, but he can get in there and, if every once in a while kind of get in the way of defenders. He does need to clean that up, but just a lack of size is not really going to allow him to be a dominant inline blocker. But he's a good route runner, can win after the catch, and uses that elite athleticism to really make plays. So I think Bell is certainly one of those guys that you're betting on the traits, you're betting on the upside, but if you can use him in creative ways, get the ball in his hand, I think he's going to be well worth a 2nd or 3rd round pick, which is that grade I have on him right now. That moves into our top 2 here. We have Jayden Sanders out of Texas. He's 6'4", 243 pounds, a little bit light, and I don't think he's necessarily the best, built tight end out there, but he's a true junior and has athletic traits for days. You certainly love some of the things that he brings to the table when it comes to his movement skills, his route running, his ability to just create separation at that catch point using some of that size, but also using those head fakes and those really creative moves to get open. He does a great job of that. He's also very effective after the catch with those athletic traits. He's not necessarily going to make a bunch of guys miss once they hit him, but he definitely can run away from people and is very solid at creating that separation and then going downfield rather quickly. He has really solid hands, really doesn't have a lot of drop issues. He's pretty good in contested catch situations as well, and definitely provides that vertical threat up the seam, which is a huge part of being a real threat at that tight end spot. The biggest downside is absolutely the blocking. He's really just not very effective at it. You can line him up as that kind of H-back tight end where you let him just kind of move across the formation, can hit the backside defender, chop his legs, or kind of run into him. You don't want him lead blocking. You definitely don't want him to be kind of at that point of attack because he's just not going to win it very consistently against linebackers, but especially defensive ends as well. If he's not lined up in that H-back spot, I really think that kind of that big slot and almost wide receiver type role is going to be the most effective for him. He definitely has a lot of really desirable traits, and I think if you make him that big slot option, you kind of take away some of his biggest weaknesses, but you're just not really drafting him to be a tight end at that point. I do think that there are some limitations just with his build and his blocking that make him not necessarily worth a first-round pick. I have a true second-round grade on him, an 81.50, but you got to love the production, the athleticism, the route running, a lot of the traits in the passing game that make him really special. He had 39 catches for 607 yards and 2 touchdowns. Once again, a very, very talented offense that he was within in that Texas scheme, so certainly still impressive numbers there, but I do have a second-round grade on Sanders, which leads us to number 1. No surprise at all. It is Brock Bowers out of Georgia. He is just truly special. A true junior, 6'4", 240 pounds. And pretty much since the first day he stepped on Georgia's campus, he has been the best tight end in the nation in college football. And really, you can see why. When you turn on the tape, he is just an athletic freak. He is so good in the receiving game, not only with his route running, his ability to just snap off and make quick routes, and he is so good at manipulating defenders, using his size and his speed to really attack them and then just ripping off an in route or really attacking them vertically and just blowing past them. He is a very, very good vertical threat. You certainly cannot just sit back and play cover 2 and let him just rip up the middle without, some kind of linebacker following him, because he will tear you apart. Auburn certainly found that out this year. I think he is special after the catch. Really, really special. He is so tough to bring down. He's somebody that just plays with such fire and intensity that defenders just bounce off of him, and he is able to turn 5-yard gains into 15-yard gains, and negative 2-yard plays into 6-yard plays. So he is just so effective for an offense. Not many times you see tight end sweeps where he's getting a jet sweep and running the ball around, or lining him up at fullback and running him fullback dive. Georgia did that all this year and in the past because they just want the ball in this guy's hands because he is truly that special. I think he's a very good blocker as well. I think he's incredibly underrated in that trait. He plays with really good effort and intensity in the blocking game. I don't think he's always the most polished there, but he really does get his assignment done almost every time. You just really don't have a lot of big concerns about Brock Bowers. It's really going to be about how valuable the tight end position is. Are you going to be able to take that guy in the top 5 and the top 10? Where does the first tight end go? But we know it's going to be Brock Bowers, and we know that if we were basing this off of pure talent in this class at their respective position, I think it would be pretty clear that Brock Bowers is a top 5 player in this class. I love what Brock Bowers does, and certainly think that any team that ends up drafting him is going to be very, very happy if they can use him effectively. He had 56 catches for 714 yards, 6 touchdowns in just 10 games this year. I have a true top 5 grade on him and think he is a very, very special prospect. That is going to do it for my top 10 tight end rankings here. Let me know your thoughts down below. Who should have made this list? Who do I have too high or too low? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like this kind of content, NFL draft content, and more, please hit that subscribe button. While you're down there, hit the like button as well. It helps push this video out to other NFL draft fans just like you. Thank you so much for watching. I will catch you in the next one.